Hi everybody. I'm just going to give it another minute just to make sure that we've got everybody joining us, but lovely to see you this evening. My name's Izzy. I am one of the student coordinators here at the CSP. I'm joined today by Kieran and David from our student reference group and Stacy Johnson, MBE, who is our guest speaker today. So just give it a couple more seconds before we make a start. Okay. Right, Kieran, I will pass over to you to do the introductions.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So hi everyone, my name is Kieran. I'm one of the Equality and Diversity Officers on the Student Reference Group, and welcome to today's talk on student leadership. I think this is something that as students doesn't come as easy as maybe other parts of kind of being a physio will, but hopefully with Stacey's talk, it's something that we can begin to implement in our practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kieran, and thank you so much for inviting me. Like I said, I'm Kieran said, I'm Stacy Johnson. I'm at the University of Nottingham. For anybody who can't see me, I am a Black woman, so I've got brown skin. I'm wearing a blue top. I tend to wave my arms around a lot. So again, if you can't see me for any reason, perhaps you can visualize me a little bit. And I'm going to spend a few minutes. I've got some slides I want to share with you. I'm going to spend a few minutes telling you about some of the thoughts I have on students as leaders. And I'm going to actually spend a lot of time talking about inclusive leadership, give you some examples of some initiatives that I've been involved in with students that have absolutely given me a rock solid belief that students are leaders, not future leaders, now leaders. And hopefully we'll spend most of the time this evening having some discussion, you guys asking me questions, me asking you questions, okay? I'm going to share my screen with you now. So in a second, hopefully you will be able to see some slides. So maybe Izzy, if you could just confirm that you can see my slides, that'd be great.
Yes, that's perfect, thanks.
Wonderful. So for me, leadership is not for the few, not even for the many, but for all. And by that I mean every healthcare worker can be leaderly, and every healthcare worker must be leaderly so that they can serve the people that we're meant to be serving. Okay, so that's why I want to talk to you about being leaderly yourself, being a leader, and also more broadly about inclusive leadership. Okay, so I'm going to talk about inclusion, I'm going to talk about inclusive leadership, I'm going to talk about you being leaders, and I'll give you a couple of examples from my own practice working with students about some of the things I think perhaps can help you along the journey, or certainly how I've become more and more to be able to understand leadership from all levels of organizations. So the first thing we want to do, of course, is distinguish between equality, diversity, and inclusion, okay? Which will explain why I then start talking about inclusive leadership, okay? So you remember what we're trying to achieve when we're thinking about equality is actually equity. So it's not that everybody gets the same input, but that we may have to have different input of resources, teaching to produce equality of opportunity. Okay, now we can see here already beginning to then think about you yourself as a clinical leader. If you've got service users coming in at different levels of need, you need to understand that your leadership, your clinical leadership, needs to involve not just giving everybody the same thing, but actually differential input. When you're thinking about working in teams, when you're thinking about leading teams yourself, this notion of distinguishing between equality and equity is important. Diversity, separate and very different to equality. So this is about having different types of people with different characteristics in your teams. Also serving populations that are diverse, the people that you will be looking after, the relatives that you will be caring for, coming from lots of different backgrounds. And what does that mean for how you deliver care? What does that mean for your clinical leadership? And inclusion, different concept again completely, which is about once there is diversity in an organization, in a team, once there is diversity and equity, how do we ensure that as an organization or as a team, you capitalize, you draw upon all of that diversity? How do you make sure that individuals feel welcome, no matter how different they are, and also valued? And you can see therefore why I tend to, all my thinking about leadership tends to become about inclusive leadership, okay? What we're aiming to achieve, like I said, is not equality, which is the picture on the left. We don't just want everybody having equal input, but not equality of opportunity, equality of experience, whether it's in your university experience, whether it's out when you're on a placement, whether you start your first job, you're 5 years into your qualification period. We're not just looking for equality of input, but the second picture, which is equality of opportunity, which is equity, which may require different inputs for different people. You know, if you imagine, you're not going to give everybody a wheelchair, right? You're going to give people who are missing a limb or people who have some kind of lower limb mobility issue a wheelchair, okay? So we're not aiming for equality, we're aiming for equity, which produces equality of opportunity. For me, inclusive leadership is important, and I really want to talk to students about inclusive leadership, because I'm not even satisfied with equity. Equity is good. But actually, my question is, why do we have people balancing on boxes? Why do we have people having to put effort into seeing over the fence and achieving equality of opportunity? My take is, let's begin to dismantle, deconstruct the fence. Let's remove the barriers. And for me, that is what inclusion is. Not just you all know, people listening to me, you all have different differences. That means you spend a lot of your life balancing on boxes, extra courses, reasonable adjustments, not bringing your authentic self to school, to work, to relationships, because you have to somehow conform, be different to how you really are. It takes a lot of resilience to balance on boxes. So while we do want to have interventions that produce equality of opportunity, wouldn't it be so much more efficient, so much more good for ourselves, our souls, if we could actually simply remove the barriers? So we really want to think about the furthest to the right picture: liberation, inclusion. So for me, this brings us then to the notion of not even just inclusion, capitalizing on all the differences in an organization or a team, but actually transformative inclusion. And this is where I'm getting you to think individually about how you walk through your life, where the things that are different about you are often viewed as a problem to be solved by you, and actually also by the organizations that you're working in. And one of the ways we solve the problem of difference is by making people conform, us conforming. Many of us take off aspects of our identity before we turn up to classes, before we turn up to a placement, and you put on armor. You shorten your name. Your gestures are different. You behave differently. You hide parts of yourself. This tyranny of conformity. And for me, transformative inclusion, both as a person, but also as organizations, teams, is where we move beyond seeing difference as just a problem to be solved. For me, we often say we need to be tolerant. For me, tolerance is a low bar. I think we should be moving beyond tolerance, and we should instead be thinking that exceptionalities, things that are different about ourselves, this is the basis for excellence. Inclusion, therefore, is an opportunity, right? Not a problem to be solved, but an opportunity. And it means, therefore, that you don't have to hide your differences. It then means that in organizations, in teams, when you're in your university setting, whether you're in a placement setting, we all feel welcome and we feel a sense of belongingness. You can bring your whole self to work and feel safe. And translate this to being a service user. Imagine having to hide parts of yourself when you are at your most vulnerable, ill, as well as for us as elements of the workforce, okay? So when I'm talking about inclusion, what I really mean is this bigger idea, which is transformative inclusion, where we're not trying to say to people, be less different, but we're saying, actually, welcome, you are different. So transformative inclusion. So what does this mean for you as a leader? I want to prompt you, I want to motivate you to be an inclusive leader, both now as a student leader, but also as you go along on your inclusion journey and develop as a positional leader, move up through the ranks once you're qualified, or actually if we've got any physios on here who are already qualified, or actually if you are facilitating student learning yourself, if you've been qualified for quite some time, or if you're in some other role where you're not a student physio. And the first thing I would say is one of the reasons that you do need to understand inclusion, diversity, equality, and inclusive leadership is because there is a moral case for inclusion. There's a moral case for you to be inclusive. It's the right thing to do. Service users, patients, and their relatives, when they come to us for support and for help, shouldn't have to be worrying about what their individual characteristics mean for the kind of care they get, the safety of their care, the excellence of their care. Okay, so there is a moral case. Similarly, if you are leading teams, when you're eventually leading teams, if you're leading teams now, if you're doing work in a student society, if you are in a class with people who have different characteristics, whether it is different ethnicities, different sexual orientation, marriage, not marriage, people who are non-binary, anything, right? There is this moral case for inclusion, making them feel welcome and safe. But also, it will make you lead better and more effectively. You will get better results. So you'll see there the Department for Business Innovation and Skills did a systematic review a few years ago, and McKinsey did some work in 2015. I don't know if they didn't believe the results. They repeated it in 2018. I don't know if they didn't believe the results. They repeated it again in 2020. And what those pieces of work identified was that organizations that have diverse workforce and leaderships that are diverse, boards that are diverse, gender-wise, ethnicity-wise, people from different backgrounds, immigrants, non-immigrants, etc., perform better. And it wasn't just around staff well-being, that is important. It wasn't just about staff turnover. They did better business, they sold more stuff. They did better innovation, better research. So diverse teams perform better. Translate that into our healthcare setting. We deliver better patient care. Our patients are safer. So there's a compelling business case for you to develop as an inclusive leader. I want you to start thinking about inclusive leadership like health and safety. So if you're sitting there thinking, yeah, but I can't tackle issues of sexual orientation. I'm straight, I wouldn't know what to say. Or I'm white, I wouldn't know what to say about ethnicity issues or race equality. I want you to start thinking about equality, diversity, and inclusion and inclusive leadership like health and safety. Bog standard, basic. Everybody has a role in an organization, maintaining health and safety. You don't have to be an expert. Nobody walks past smoke. Somebody takes action. You call somebody, you break the fire glass. You don't have to be an expert in health and safety. So for me, inclusion is not just the preserve of experts and inclusive leadership experts, but actually the responsibility of every physiotherapist, every nurse. I'm a nurse by background, okay? And so one of the things I want you to think about in your leadership journey is repositioning inclusion simply as skill. It's not just shared values. It's not some mysterious magic values thing where you suddenly have this ability to speak about inclusion or about exclusion or about racism or about sexism magically. And that's when you start the conversation. You start the conversation now because every clinician has the responsibility to start talking about inclusion and being inclusive. The tool that has helped me as a Black woman be able to talk about any aspect of marginalization, whether it is sexual orientation, whether it is trans issues, whether it's disability issues, is this idea of cultural humility. You don't have to be culturally competent or perfect at having these conversations. You must simply approach the conversations with humility. And here you will see the link to some of the kinds of leadership theory that you may have come across on your courses, servant leadership, thinking about your followers and followership, okay? So one of the things I would urge you to do as you start your leadership journey is seek cultural humility. The idea that, look, I don't know everything there is to know about your characteristics. I don't fully understand what is it like to be a trans man or a trans woman or a person with a disability. But you know, your safety, your having a good experience in my team or in this organization is so important to me that I'm going to start the conversation. Forgive me if I get it wrong. I don't know the right words. Help me to get it right. And so for me, this has been a really powerful tool. It means that even when my little heart is beating really fast, that I might offend somebody, I demonstrate, look, I care so much about you feeling welcome that I'm going to start the conversation and be courageous as a clinical leader. Inclusive leaders recognize the value of difference. This notion of, you know what, I want to do my job really well, and I therefore need every mind, every person here putting their ideas on the table. Okay, so inclusive leaders value difference. And therefore they practically will tend to seek to convene diverse teams and bring the voices of those diverse people into the conversation. They don't marginalize people. They don't interrupt people, for example, who sound and look different. So that's about you being an inclusive leader. So those of you on the call who are thinking, yeah, I love weird leaders. I'm interested in people on the margin, which is why I'm interested in student leadership, why I'm interested in inclusive leadership. So the unicorn leaders on the call who perhaps haven't seen themselves as leaders. I'm talking to women. I'm talking to Black, Asian, and other minority ethnic physios on the call. I'm talking to the physio who started their course at 37. I'm talking to the working class physiotherapy student. I'm talking to the person with the facial tattoos. I'm talking to the person with the blue hair. I'm talking to the person with the anxiety, with depression. Whatever is the thing that has made you feel less than other leaders. I'm not a leader. I can't be. The unicorns. I want to say to you, proceed as if welcome. Because you remember that McKinsey study, the BIS study, where they identified that diverse teams perform better. This study here by Phillips and colleagues, for me, took the thinking even further. The paper's called, Is the Pain Worth the Gain? So they found the same thing. Diverse teams performed better. But what I thought was interesting about this paper, they asked the teams, so they had teams that were homogenous, all white or all women, and then they had mixed up teams, right? And the mixed up teams, diverse teams, mix of women, ethnicities, and so on, they performed the tasks better, right? Now that's what the McKinsey research found. But what was interesting about this study is they asked the teams how they thought they performed. The homogenous teams, all women, all men, all white people, all minority ethnic groups, and they expressed greater confidence in their performance, and they overestimated their performance. So remember, the mixed up teams perform better, but when they asked the teams, the homogenous team says, oh yeah, we did very well. We got along really well. When in fact, we probably aced the task when they hadn't. Right? So this is the thing. People in homogenous teams tend to believe they will perform better because we believe that if we are with similar people, if there's harmony, cultural fit, that you will perform better. When actually, difference encourages people to perform better. Where you have groups that have socially distinct characteristics, you tend to ask better questions. You tend to double check, do you mean this? And therefore they perform better. For me, what this has done, because you might imagine, you know, I'm at the University of Nottingham. I am often the only Black woman in the room. You can imagine that, you know, it might be that I'd be slinking around. I'm the only, I should be quiet. This paper has made me understand that they need me. They need my socially distinct voice, or else we're going to walk off a cliff, right? Because it's all this, it might be the same ideas, right? So if you are a unicorn, if you are often the only in a room and you sit quietly and listen, you know, there's nothing wrong sitting quietly and listening, right? But actually remember, you are needed in those groups. You are needed in those teams and in those organizations because you may think differently. You have a different background. Your background might mirror the patient group that you're talking about, right? Speak up, walk and go boldly. Doesn't come without fear. But I'm sure other people have heard me say before, don't be afraid of the fear. Don't fear fear. Instead, let the fear stimulate and catalyze your courage. But walk boldly, proceed as if welcome. We need the unicorn leaders. In fact, you're worth your weight in gold. Difference is to be celebrated because it can help organizations, teams perform better. So be an inclusive leader, but also if you are somebody who adds diversity to a team, capitalize on that and really make your voice be heard. Don't be afraid. Don't be tiptoeing around with your shoulders hunched. Be bold. Let me tell you about a couple of projects I've been involved in that have really confirmed to me that students can be inclusive leaders and that the leadership of student life can be inclusive, as I've been talking about. So the first one is a project which is the European Junior Leadership Academy. And I'm telling you about EGLA because I want you to look out for opportunities like this. As well, things like 150 Leaders, Council of Deans, any leadership programs that your university is running, or any other organizations you're involved in. Okay, so this is a project which was four countries: Slovenia, Portugal, University of Nottingham, England, and Trinity College, Dublin. Okay, and what we did is we identified, and this was student nurses and student midwives. Okay, Council of Deans, 150 Leaders, as you know, is all AHPs and nursing, midwifery, everything, right? Physiotherapy, speech and language therapy, and so on. But EGLA was nurses and midwives. What we did is we identified students who had already demonstrated leadership aptitude. So probably a lot of you are on here thinking, I'm not a leader, but look at what things you have done that suggests that you are leaders, right? If you are, a youth group leader, you are leading a brownies team, you are a course rep as well. You may not see yourself as a leader, but for me, that is demonstration of leadership aptitude. So what we did, we identified students who were already showing leadership aptitude. We then supported them to develop their leadership identity, how they saw themselves as leaders. Okay, so we actually weren't teaching them leadership skills. They kind of picked up leadership skills, but what we were saying was reflect, be introspective, think about the things you have done, and develop your internal view of yourself as the leader. You have to see yourself as a leader before others sometimes can. What we did find was actually some of those students who we ended up on the program were identified by others as leaders. They hadn't seen themselves as leaders, but a personal tutor had, okay? And we therefore worked with them to build their leadership identity. For me, identity is foundational. It means that no matter where you go, whatever environment you're in, whether people are telling you, be quiet, sit down, you're just, you're too newly qualified, you're too young, you're too whatever else they are telling you, because your leadership identity is strong and is being developed, you can withstand all of that noise and simply focus on developing and going along your leadership journey. We then expose them to the leadership signatures of inspirational positional leaders. So basically we put them in the company of leaders so they can observe, what does leadership look like in action? What kind of leadership do I want to emulate? Actually, what kind of leadership do I not want to emulate? And we created experiences for them that facilitated this. So we brought them together in a leadership retreat in Nottingham and then one in Slovenia. We gave them each a very senior nurse or midwife, national leader to mentor them. But we also gave them each a policy or leadership internship where they could go to. So for example, Izzy earlier was talking about how she has some students at the CSP. That would be, I'm not quite sure what they're doing there, Izzy. We'll maybe find out in the Q&A. But that was probably what we would have called an internship, where they can do things to kind of practice their leadership in the company of other leaders. Okay, and there's I've got the website there at the bottom. Okay, what that program showed me is that leaders are not 20 years in their career. Students are leaders and are leaderly. Another project that I'm working on is the Remedy project, Reverse Mentoring for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. And this is where we've paired up students or junior staff. So it's in some settings like the NHS, it's been staff. In universities like Nottingham, it's been students. We've paired them up with leaders, and the junior person, the student, is the mentor of the leader. So it might be a second year student reverse mentoring a professor, right? For example, I'm an associate professor. I was reverse mentoring my vice chancellor. I'm an associate professor. I was being reverse mentored by a young Black guy from London because I grew up in the Caribbean. I'm a woman. I've never been stopped by the police. He's like, look, you think you understand the Black experience, love, but let me tell you, okay? And that blew my mind, okay? So let me just quickly try to play you a little video. Just bear with me, about reverse mentoring.
Reverse mentoring for equality, diversity and inclusion. What is reverse mentoring for equality, diversity and inclusion? Typically, reverse mentoring is when a senior member of staff is mentored by a more junior member of staff. Using the remedy approach, we've adapted this process to help with improving equality, diversity and inclusion. The remedy approach, developed by Stacy Johnson at the University of Nottingham, adapts traditional intergenerational reverse mentoring to enhance the cultural humility of leaders and organisational influencers for the purpose of improving equality, diversity and inclusion. This means that student and staff leaders are mentored by students and staff who identify as belonging to groups underrepresented at universities and in university leadership. This might be, for example, students or staff from minority ethnic backgrounds, students or staff who are disabled, or students and staff who belong to the LGBTQ+ community. These conversations provide the opportunity for mentors to challenge leaders on how they lead and to share how their experience of university life may be different. For example, the problems they may encounter, or the things that make them feel included and welcome. The remedy approach facilitates conversations about justice that are different. The conversations are different because they are less superficial. We ask reverse mentors and reverse mentees to actively seek and immerse themselves in discomfort so that emotion is put back into the conversation. Sharing these experiences can help us individually and collectively understand the work that needs to be done to make things more inclusive for everyone. So why not start the conversation now with reverse mentoring for equality, diversity and inclusion?
Great. And of course, we're talking, I think there we use the example specifically of disability, ethnic minority groups and so on, but we're also expanding that work to include anything that has made you feel silenced on the margins, right? So some of those characteristics are protected by law. Some of you know the 2010 Equality Act, but you know that there are aspects of your identity not protected by law, being working class, having a regional accent, you know, all the other things that you have had people call you out on, or in some way it you think might slow down your leadership journey, your rise through the ranks, for example. And we're actually going to be pairing up students with leaders to say, you know, let me tell you what it's like to be me in this organization. Let me challenge your thinking about people like me. Okay, so that's reverse mentoring, and another opportunity for students to demonstrate their leadership aptitude. I'm going to just share my screen again. I've got my eye on time. I don't want Kieran to kick me off. Let me just share a couple more slides with you really quickly, and then we'll open it up for discussion and questions. And as you can see in that slide, there's a link to, there's a couple of other videos that you might be interested in watching about reverse mentoring. And just to say here, this is what an NHS finance director said about being reverse mentored by a junior member of staff. She said, it's the most important piece of work I've done in my 30 years in the NHS. So, you know, if you ever have the opportunity to reverse mentor a professor or a clinician, grab it. This is where you can influence their thinking. Okay. So let me say one last thing. So you remember I've talked about in the EGLA mentoring, I've just talked about, you know, a disruptive approach to mentoring, reverse mentoring. You can tell I'm a big fan of mentoring, right? Or I have been in the past. I've been thinking a lot more recently about, well, what else, when I'm looking at students and they go out into the NHS, when I'm looking at different types of students, how does it come to be that some students don't progress once they're qualified to band 29, to boards, for example, or whatever is your ambition for your leadership journey or your career journey? And a big, thinking a lot, reading a lot on what do we do to disrupt that normal order of things. That means that some people are excluded from leadership. So definitely mentorship. So, in your leadership journey, seek mentors. In your leadership journey, particularly if you are a socially distinct person, a woman in a setting where it might be male dominated, a BME person, I don't know, a hijabi wearing woman, a person with a disability, whatever, right? So seek mentorship. Think about reverse mentoring leaders, right? But I came across this piece of work by a professor from London Business School, Erminia Ibarra. And she talked about how, remember I keep saying, seek mentorship. We gave EGLA students mentors. And she says, she's got this really great podcast, Women Are Over-Mentored but Under-Sponsored. The podcast is the second link, and the top link is it's only like a couple of pages, quite a short read, where she says a lack of sponsorship is keeping women from advancing in leadership. And I've read that work, and it occurred to me that the same could, if you substituted BME people, disabled people, mature students, or somebody who's come into physiotherapy education in their 30s and is hoping for a big career, right? You substitute all those, anybody who has an unconventional journey into education or into being a newly qualified physio, the same might be said of them, right? She distinguishes between mentorship, giving guidance, sharing knowledge, and sponsorship, making opportunities, making a way, right? So, I know some of you might have heard the kind of shorthand. A mentor talks with you, a coach talks to you, and a sponsor talks about you in the corridors of power where you can't speak for yourself, okay? And one of the things she says is that when we're trying to help people to advance, particularly groups that we're seeing that are underrepresented in the leadership, we tend to say, well, just give them some mentorship. Right? So yes, seek mentorship, have a mentor always, and always seek to be mentoring somebody else. But she also argues that mentorship on its own is not enough. We also need people, leaders, to make opportunities, right? And she's got this nifty little continuum. So number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can see it. Number 1 is mentorship. That's what I'm saying to you, right? Get somebody to provide advice, support, separately coaching. Right? But she also argues that to advance in your career, develop as a leader, we need more. We need people to sponsor us, strategize, give insider information, connect us with influential people. Talk about her in the corridors of power. This student did this really excellent project. This Asian woman did this wonderful work. This disabled member of staff did, right? Or, they may not be saying this disabled member of staff, but speaking about and giving opportunity to staff that are underrepresented in leaderships. Being an opportunity giver, high visibility opportunities as well, where they will come into contact with professors, where they will come into contact with directors or the most senior physio, or where they will come into contact with ministers or whoever the most senior physio is in the country, for example. And finally, they will advocate on behalf of you. Now, remember, you can ask somebody to mentor you, but you can't ask somebody to sponsor you, because remember, they are spending their political capital. They're using their reputation. They're staking their reputation to make an opportunity. So remember, they have to trust you. They have to get to know you. They have to be convinced of your track record. You have to have impressed them by doing your work, right? If you've had a little project with them, you have to have done that well. And they then think, right, yeah, I want to use my influence. Because remember, every time they use their influence, they're spending political capital to bring you to the attention of leaders, okay? So this is one of the reasons why, for me, it's really important that you, in your leadership journey, always work as if a potential sponsor is watching you. You do your work as excellently when you're by yourself as if you've got somebody that you know is watching you. Always work, do projects, do your work to the very best of your ability, as if you're trying to impress somebody who might sponsor you, okay? Now, you can't ask somebody to sponsor. You can't walk up to me and say, can you be my sponsor? As you can with a mentor, can you be my mentor? You can absolutely do that. But what you can do is make it known to people what your ambitions are, or what your journey is going to be like, or what your goal is. So you can't say to somebody, can you be my sponsor? But you can say, I'm really interested in a specific type of physio. I'm really interested in understanding leadership better. Can you keep me in mind for any projects that come up? I'm looking for a stretch project. Can you keep me in mind if you see it? I'm really interested in international work. Can you keep me in mind if there's any opportunities that you think I might find interesting? Are there any ways I can help you? I know that you are working on this project, Professor Jones. I'm wondering whether you need any help. How can I help you with that? I'm really keen to learn, right? So you're not saying, oh, please, can you sponsor me? But you're saying, look, I'm interested. Can you create an opportunity for me by asking? Keep me in mind, okay? So I guess I want you to think as you proceed in this journey. We often maybe overemphasize mentorship, but actually think about how you can also make people feel confident about strategizing on your behalf, connecting you, giving you opportunities, and advocating. If you, as you also develop as a leader and you become leaders of teams, think about how you can do that for people who are different to yourself. Because one of the things that Professor Ibarra identifies is that we tend to sponsor in our own image. Right? So chances are, if you're a male physio, you will sponsor other young male physio. 10 years time, you can be looking, unconsciously, you sponsor, give opportunities to people who are similar to you, other male physios. Similarly, if you are from a BME background, you're more likely to sponsor a BME person. If you're from a white background, you're more likely to sponsor. Put yourself on the line, take a risk for somebody who's similar to you, similar background, similar ethnicity. Okay, so as you develop as a leader and as an inclusive leader, think about who you are sponsoring. Actively look around your team. There are not very many BME people above band 8. There are not very many people with disabilities or whatever, whoever is missing in action. Think about, how can I make a way for those kinds of people? Is one of the things I want you to think about in terms of inclusive leadership going forward. So final words, and then I will get to discussion. Your instinct to lead is legitimate. Don't let anybody tell you to wait. You are now leaders. You're not just, you are future leaders of organizations. I understand that. So when they refer to you as future leaders, that's true. But you are leading now. Think about some of the things that you're doing now. Those are acts of leadership. You do not have to be a perfect leader. You only, at this point, need to be leaderly, as in exhibiting some of the characteristics of a leader. So I get really impatient. When we have that debate about, are leaders born or made? Can everyone be a leader? Who cares? Everyone can be leaderly, right? As in demonstrating, exhibiting the qualities of leadership, right? Each of you, no matter what your background, no matter how long you've been in the game, can be leaderly. So lead now. And now I'll open up for questions and discussion. Don't be shy, even if you want to challenge what I'm thinking.
Thank you very much for that, Stacey. That was amazing. I never really thought about it from the kind of health and safety standpoint that you gave. So I think I'll start with a question. I guess, so hypothetically, say you're a student physio, you're on placement in a team that's been together for quite a while, they get the work done, but I guess you come into this team, and as someone maybe from a different background, or maybe just like diversity of thought, you see it differently. You think, oh, okay, maybe we could do this differently and kind of improve patient outcomes. How would you begin to have that conversation with a team that's well established and that's worked in a certain way for so long as a student? Because obviously there's like hierarchy and stuff, like you're seeing differently as a student. How would you begin to kind of start that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Carefully, acknowledging how well they've already done. Right. So for me, this is one of the things I think we have to do to improve inclusiveness, but also to improve quality of care, which is we need to decouple challenge from negativity. People kind of think, as soon as you're challenged, they think, oh, they don't like me, or they think they're better, or what's wrong with this student, right? And I think, we're doing a lot of work with organizations so that they decouple the notion of challenge with negativity, right? So carefully, right? And you can say, like, yo, wow, I'm learning so much from you as a team. One of the things I've thought is, or I was recently reading a paper about, or I wondered whether we had tried in the past too. Okay, now what we did find, and this is what I said about let fear catalyze your courage, because I'm not saying that's going to be easy. It's scary, especially if they're assessing you 2 weeks down the line, right? One of the things we found when we were doing that European Junior Leadership Academy project, we had a leadership festival where we asked really senior nurses, patients, lots of leaders and different people, what do you see in students and student leadership that's different to normal leadership? And they said things like, so they said naivete, so things that we would normally think of as negative. Being naive, they said, was a good thing because it meant students asked questions all the time. They said idealism, often seen as negative, was something they valued in student leaders. They said that junior leadership was a distinctive kind of leadership. They said the notion of students approaching everything with fascination, the things that as an established physio, you're like, yeah, we've always done that. Students always come in and say, wow, that's amazing what you're doing. But also novelty, right? So they come in, so they make everything novel. Things that staff have been doing for years. They're like, oh, wow, fresh eyes, right? And they said that often students are kind of made to think those things are bad, but that they valued that as a characteristic of junior leadership, right? So my take is the thing that should give you the confidence to say, I know you've been doing that for years. I wondered whether, looking at that with fresh eyes, I wonder whether, right? Just walk with that confidence, you know? The other thing as well with reverse mentoring is often what we're saying is we want the junior person to mentor the leader, or the different person to mentor the leader. And what we're saying is we want the leader to see different things. So things they weren't aware of. The young person says, did you realize that? But also to see things differently. So stuff that they're already doing all the time, their normal rituals. When a junior person, a different person, a Black person, a man or woman is walking behind them, they say, what, did you realize that you do this all the time? So seeing things differently, their normal routine differently. And as a result, they do different things and do things differently. Does that make sense? Right? There's lots of difference in there, right? So for me, the thing that gives you the courage is I know that they might take it badly, but actually my fresh eyes, the way I see things novelly, the things I can give them the opportunity to see something different actually is beneficial. Because the thing is, remember, the health service ain't working. The world is not working perfectly. Right? So unless they can tell you we have 0 pressure sores, I'm a nurse, right? So I don't even know what the outcomes and metrics would be for physio. Unless they could tell you that they have 0 waiting lists, they have 0 whatever would be the perfect physio service, then they need somebody's input. They need to improve, right? So my take is, again, proceed boldly, carefully, but with that confidence of fresh eyes, student eyes, junior eyes are valuable. And we don't just want good care, we want excellent care. Where there's excellent care, we want outstanding care. And you know, if they had got it cracked, then care would be perfect, wouldn't it? And it is not.
Thank you very much.
Oh, look, I'm looking in the Q&A. Ooh,
Yeah,
lots of stuff in the Q&A.
now.
Ooh, okay. What are the most important qualities of leadership? So this is from Elspeth. So it's very possible you ask another person and they'll tell you another 3 things. You ask me tomorrow, I'll tell you something different. For me, the most important qualities of leadership are identity, right? The foundational thing. So a couple of years ago, there was all this work that I disapproved of, which is about the image of nursing. And I was like, image is not where you start. Image is what other people see. For me, it was about identity, right? So if you imagine, image in a mirror is nothing. It is simply a reflection of yourself and your identity, right? So I kept saying to the CNO who was doing the work, chief nursing officer, I don't think we should be focusing on image. We should be focusing on identity, how we see ourselves as nurses, right? And I think it's the same with leadership. I feel that one of the most important qualities of leadership is confidence that comes from you being reflective about yourself, being clear about your values, because that then plays out as your leadership signature, right? Before you learn leadership skills, communication, blah, blah, all the things that other people might say are the important qualities of leadership, you first have to understand your values, what you believe is important in giving care, and therefore leadership is my take, right? So for me, first, it is that self-reflection, understanding yourself, being a reflective person and leader. For me, that forms the basis of everything. And then you can then build on that with what we, I guess, are thinking about as characteristics of leadership, right? Good communicator, being able to persuade, being able to coach and inspire others to be their best self, okay? So for me, it's identity is the most important. Leadership identity is the most important quality of leadership, I'd say. Elspeth, do you want to come back and, I don't know, actually, are you able to turn off your mic? I can't remember what we're doing it here, but Elspeth, what do you think? Do you think, yeah, no, that's not the important thing, Stacey. If you can.
Sorry, Stacey, I don't think she can.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. All right. I never know what version of Zoom people are using. Yeah. But Elspeth, if you're thinking, no, I don't agree with that, Stacey, then just type a comment, right? Ahmad, let's see, you've got what? Okay, thank you, very good. With a high number of student placements needed following the pandemic, our thoughts as an organization will be to offer student placements in a leadership capacity. What will be your thoughts on this and any recommendations? Okay, yes. Okay, so and I've had this conversation actually in the Midlands in nursing, right? So I always start off trying my ideas with nurses and nursing, right? My take is for allied health professionals, nursing, midwifery, and all of it. We've got some really weird ideas about what a placement is and what clinical practice is. We are still thinking that clinical practice is hands-on manipulation, intervention on a person in front of us. For me, clinical practice, physiotherapy practice, about which I know less, but nursing practice, caregiving, is also about how do I do interventions that have global impact or collective impact on a community, many people. How do my practice is also about observing leadership. My practice is also about being involved in policy making or policy implementation, right? So for me, one of the ways in which I think we can massively increase placement capacity, and it's definitely something we're working on in the Midlands and East, is I think every hospital, every health facility, every arm's length body, not just CSP, but Health Education England, Care Quality Commission, they should be offering student placements. Because for me, that's clinical practice, understanding inspection regimes, understanding what quality is by going to the Care Quality Commission, working with a service manager in a hospital, for example. You might never see a patient, but that is how care happens. Working with a procurement team, for me, that is absolutely clinical practice. So I would say, yeah, do it fast. And not only that, we need to change the way, I suppose, we as students think about clinical practice, right? So often students are, I want to do all the sexy stuff. I want to do intensive care physio. That's real physiotherapy practice. Or I want to do real community or whatever. Yeah, sitting in an office, understanding quality, understanding efficiency is going to affect quality of care. Some of you will know the Institute of Medicine, Maxwell's work, the Care Quality Commission, the 6 dimensions of quality, safety, efficiency, effectiveness, person-centeredness. I forget what the others are, right? Good quality care is not just how well you can assess range of motion. I'm making it up because I don't know physio very well. It's also how you can make care more cost effective. So yeah, sorry, long answer to a short question. Yeah, I would say leadership or policy or research placements, all of those things. We need to get away from the idea that clinical practice is working on a ward, doing things to people. So I'm agreeing and saying, yes, we should build on that, Ahmad. Christian, what can those that aren't unicorns do to add their experience to a new team? Absolutely. Again, the same thing, to be honest, be bold. Because the thing is, even if you aren't a unicorn, even if you walk into a team and there's people who look similar to you, your difference is I'm a student, or I'm a second year student, or you know what, I am Christian. Right? I am Christian. I've got a different background. I've come from somewhere different, right? My take is, what is distinctive about you and what might be helpful to that team? Okay. Always, of course, excellent communication skills, being persuasive, right? You're not going to jump in and say, yeah, guys, you realize you're doing it wrong, right? Let me tell you the right way. That's not how you do it, right? But I would say anybody will have, I mean, it's not just the 8 or 9 protected characteristics. It's not just about if you are BME, it's not just if you have a disability. It is that we are all, as humans, socially distinct. There will be something about you that is something that brings fresh eyes to a team. And I would say just see that as something that is positive. Yeah, ask questions, bring, if you have nothing else, if you are exactly the same as everybody else, bring a different newspaper, a different journal article, for example. You have additional knowledge, because remember, it's not just about being distinct socially, gender, ethnicity, but also having thought diversity. I think differently because I am a second year student nurse talking to a group of student physio talking to a group of registered physios. Okay. Just reading what Nicole says. I'm just wondering if there are any leadership attributes that you would recommend bringing up, example, in job interviews for future leaders. Yeah. As a student, I find it difficult to identify my leadership qualities, my leaderly qualities to talk myself up. Absolutely. This is an interesting one, isn't it? So this is the thing about us unicorns, right? And you might be a unicorn for so many different reasons. You've come into physio late, or I don't even know what your gender balance in physio is. If you were a male nurse, for example, you're one of very few, whatever your unicorn thing is. This is the thing, we tend to doubt ourselves. We tend to think, if I talk about myself, they'll think I am immodest, right? Now, I don't know what it's like in physio, but this is another one of the bees I have in my bonnet, is that in nursing, ambition and the expression of ambition too early is you get punished for it, right? Or some people get punished for it, right? So I often say to my students, do not hide your ambition. Do not be fearful of being ambitious, right? Don't let people tell you, look, just stop trying to look too far ahead. Just do your job today. Just learn the basics, right? So sometimes because of the reaction people have when we say, oh, I want to be a senior physio, or I want to lead a team, or I want to do a PhD. Sometimes because of the reaction we have had, we sometimes hide our leadership ambitions, our wish, our yearning to lead, or we hide our leadership qualities, and there are some that are linked with particular social characteristics. If you're a woman, you're bossy. If you're a man, you're incisive and assertive. All of those reasons that we begin to hide, not being our authentic self. And I would say just shed all of that. Now, don't be arrogant, because that will wind me up, obviously. But I think certainly this is the thing about identity, right? What do you see yourself as, and therefore how it manifests itself? One of the things, a great question to ask, somebody was saying about future employers, what development opportunities are there? What would you like? What kind of milestones do you want to see from me? At 1 year, what do you want me to be doing and thinking about? At 5 years, what do you want me to think about? What are the biggest challenges in the organization? And how do you think a newly qualified physio like me can help you with that? I'm seeking, once I've settled into my preceptorship 6 months or whatever, I want to do stretch assignments. What opportunities are there for that in the organizations? I want to help the organization. Those kinds of questions you might ask at job interviews. I'm thinking, Nicole. And Ellie, let me see, we've got a couple of minutes. Leadership placement, absolutely. So Ellie is just saying that she agrees about the leadership placement. I'm currently on a leadership placement, and it's highlighted to me how important it is for people to develop the leadership skills prior to getting into traditional leadership role. Absolutely. And more managerial roles. And again, whether you're thinking about managerial type stuff like delegating, budgeting, and so on, or leadership, right? And I think this is the thing, this is why I developed the Junior Leadership Academy, because I was like, why is it that we wait until somebody is a band 7 ward sister or senior physio, and then we send them on a leadership development program? They've already developed their leadership skills by trial and error. Let's grab people early who are demonstrating this aptitude and support them, because it accelerates their leadership development, not necessarily their movement in the organization, but certainly their development as a leader. It also means that the organization gets the benefit of their leadership earlier. What's the point of waiting until they're 6 years qualified before we give people leadership development opportunities? So absolutely, I would say you're absolutely right, Ellie. It is important to develop it. And again, I would say not just leadership skills, but leadership identity. Because I think the thing about leadership identity, if you build somebody's leadership identity, they become hungry for leadership development. That means they will seek out the learning of the skills, right? Whereas if you just teach them skills, it's like giving the person the fish and not teaching them to fish, if that makes sense, right? So for me, it starts with identity development. Then they seek the skills development is my take. Yeah. Let me see, Izzy, or Kieran, I'm going to hand back to you because I think we've got all the questions, and we've got 2 minutes left, so I'll hand back to Izzy.
Thank you, Stacey. I'll just say for me, and then I'll pass over to Kieran, that has been amazing, and I've had lots of amazing feedback already from people on the chat who just wanted to let me know how incredible they found this session, what an amazing speaker you are, obviously, as well as the actual content that you're delivering. It's been amazing, it's been fascinating. Thank you from everybody at CSP students. Thank you from the student reference group, and of course everybody attending the webinar tonight. I'm just going to pop up a quick poll for everybody, and I am very happy to send out, there we go, I'm very happy to send out any links, the recording. Stacey, if you're happy to pass on the slides, and I can send those out to everybody as well by the end of the week. Right, we're almost done. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for voting. Kieran, can I pass over to you?
Yeah. So thank you very much, Stacey. You've inspired me basically. What I'd say is, what would be your kind of number one take home for us? If we could take one thing from this, I know I've taken loads, but if we could condense it to one kind of take home message.
Gosh, I would say, hard questions, Kieran. I would say one take-home message: the service, NHS service, needs every hand on deck. All the metaphors, every shoulder to the pump, right? So, and particularly, let me tell you, this pre-coronavirus normal was not working for everyone. There were specific groups, LGBTQ patients, people, BME people, who were struggling. Coronavirus has simply, we know, just shed a light on the inequalities that were already existing, right? BME people, LGBTQ community, disproportionately affected by COVID, right? More likely to die, right? So pre-COVID normal was not working for many groups. We need each of you to put your minds to solving the difficulties that we're going to face over the next few years recovering from COVID as a health service. It means that we can't afford to only have some people working well. We can't just have, it can't be based on ethnicity. It can't be, everybody has to feel welcome to share ideas and solve the wicked problems, right? So you as leaders, bring everybody in. Amplify people's voices that you haven't heard. If you've got a BME colleague and you notice they've been interrupted, or then people aren't listening to their ideas, be an advocate for them. Say, I really want to hear what Nkosi had to say or what Femi had to say, right? If you are from a minority group, whether it is because you are a male physio and there's loads of female physios, or whether you are a Black or whatever, speak up, walk boldly, right? We need every mind in the game. And again, if you are leaders yourself, make sure that you're capitalizing on everybody, bring everybody in, make everybody feel welcome, so that we can work better to create excellence, not just really good, okay healthcare, but excellence. Because we got a massive hill to climb post COVID. And I just want to say as well, Kieran, thank you, a personal thank you to you, because you're the one who first reached out to me, I think, to come and talk to physios. I love physios. I'm a nurse, but physios are amazing. My mum had a stroke a couple of years ago, and I always knew what nurses did, but I thought, well, the physio was the only person that said to my mum, what do you want to achieve? How do you see yourself in 3 months' time? What do you want to be able to do? The nurse never asked her that. Okay, so yeah. Physios rock.
Thank you. I think you've got one more question in the chat.
Let's see.
On the Q&A bit.
Yes, I'll be sharing the presentation. Was that the question, Kieran? Is that the Q&A, or is that in the chat?
Would you recommend the Edward Jenner Leadership Program?
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. I was typing the answer. I would say, yeah. I would say grab any opportunity for leadership development along the way. And I mean, I don't know a lot about the Edward Jenner program and the Mary C. Cole and, you know, all the different ones that are in the NHS Leadership Academy. But I would say if anybody is sending you, say, yes, please, off you go and develop yourself. Absolutely. Yeah. And yes, I'll be sharing the slides.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Stacey. Thanks everyone for joining. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care. Bye for now.
Bye.